Welcome to Titan HST's Business Continuity Today, hosted by Todd DeVoe, where planning meets reality.
Good morning. Man, I like that sound drop right there. It's always exciting. This is Todd DeVoe, and I'm the director of oh my gosh, what am I doing? I am the director of emergency services at Titan HST, and I've been involved in responding to emergencies and disasters well for a long time. And so, in addition to the work I do at Titan HST, I am also a educator at the post-secondary level, and I love learning. I love reading and sharing what I learn. That's why it's a passion for me. And so welcome to Business Continuity. Today, we're together. We will continue to learn. And today, we're going to get into the business continuity basics. And one of the reasons why I wanted to kind of go this way for a minute is I was talking to a friend of mine, right? Yep, the same guy I always talk to. He's behind the scenes right here. And the discussion was like, what is business continuity and what does it mean to him and to me and to what it is? And he brought up some interesting points about some equivocation of terminology, right? Those are big words. And yes, the business continuity can be broken into different things. A lot of people think of business continuity in the space of IT, right? Which it's a part of it, right? For sure. What I find interesting about some of the IT business continuity language is that very much mirrors the physical disaster response of like earthquakes, tornadoes, and stuff. They even call it disaster response. They even have a CERT team, right? Not a community emergency response team, but a computer emergency response team. So it's interesting to see that crossover. So you can see how there's some confusion and what it is and what business continuity really means at the end of the day. If you want to think of it, this is in the government sense, right? It's continuity of government operations, right? In business sense, it's the continuity of business operations. It's to be able to keep your business, keep your organization, if you're not a business, up and running during a crisis, right? Or hopefully we can prevent the crisis, but during some disruption. So when we get down to the basics, when a person introduces someone to business continuity, the concepts, right? It's business, right? It's in the name, right? Business continuity. Crisis management, right, was part of it. Crisis communications is another section of it. IT, like we talked about, disaster recovery, which is the term they use as DR, right? And there's a tendency to read and understand the concepts, in the English definition. It's useful. But BC, EM, CM, CC, IT, DR, all these crazy acronyms, right? We live in this world of acronyms. Has to have definitions associated with it, and we have to be on the same page of what that means. So let's break this down a little bit. What is business continuity? In the military, we used to say break it down Barney style, right? Break it down to the point of where the simplest form can understand. That's what we're going to try to do here today a little bit. Hopefully I don't muddy the waters more, right? My goal is to definitely, hopefully make the waters a little bit more clear, or at least clear in the sense of where I'm coming from with this. Business continuity is the organization's ability to continue operations through and after significant disaster has occurred. That's the basic definition of it, right? It is, I'm going to read that again. Business continuity is an organization's ability to continue its operations throughout and after a significant disaster has occurred. So when we're talking about government, right, continuity of government operations, not necessarily, succession of power. That's one thing. But it's also, being able to do simple things like, can you still, can the city hall still function, right? Now, if we think about the crisis of COVID, we all had to figure out what that meant, right? Whether it's virtually working, whether it's having limited office hours, long lines, and only one person in the building at a time, things like this. The organizations are struggling to figure out what this means. Today, you still walk around malls and shopping centers, you'll see where they have lined out 6 feet apart with the sticker still on the floor. They were figuring out how we can continue to give services and goods to people during a crisis. And that's realistically part of the business continuity planning is what do we do during a COVID crisis, right? During a pandemic, if you will, to continue giving services. So these are going to things like natural disasters, fires are a great example of this, right? Whether they're wildland fires or if they're just your building happened to unfortunately catch on fire. Cyber is included in this, cyber threat. When we were talking about the idea of continuing education services before this COVID thing even occurred, excuse me, one of the things that we really discussed was how easy or difficult, or what were the challenges, I suppose, of setting up a complete IT infrastructure at, say, a used at an old, say, grocery store or Walmart or whatever, right? And you going in there and setting up that same level to be able to continue to do services if, for whatever reason, you couldn't get back on the campus, such as, say, like an earthquake is kind of the experience that, or fire that I was looking at when we were doing these planning things. Cyber threat. This is a serious thing that's going on right now. There are issues happening in the world today, right this second, as we're sitting here listening to me talk about cyber threat. That is a serious cyber threat to the infrastructure around the world, whether it's the United States or other parts of the world. Now, when we think about these threats, we can't think about them colloquially anymore. We have to think about them around the world, globally. That is because we have issues that are impacting today. I was working this morning on some stuff, and I was working with somebody that was over in England, right? I have students now that are come to me from all over the world. So when we think about this, it is a global world. So cyber threat to, say, Australia is seriously, it could be a cyber threat here to your operations in the United States. Server failures, long-term outages, things like this, incidents that disrupt the day-to-day operations of your business. You've all dealt with, at one time or another, the internet going down due to whatever reasons, right? And think about that on a longer scale. Do you have the ability to move from digital, which we are on right now, right, to analogs, aka pens and paper, pencils? I like pencils, right, because they don't ever run out of ink. So the aim is to have those essential business functions up and running with minimal downtime. So doing this ensures that your business can continue to serve customers and facilitate providers at the least with the least amount of disruption. So when I was setting up our business continuity plan for the city that I was working at the time, I put in totes, plastic totes, big boxes, pens, paper, staples, any office supplies that you need. I actually did pencils, like I'm serious about the pencil thing because they don't run out of ink, right? Pads that you'd need. I had any of the important documents, forms, put it on print and made into a pad, so they had those forms ready to go. It was in a box. If we needed to move things, we could actually have the entire city up and running with a timely manner in various different locations around the city. So it's important that all your business functions can be better sustained by a large enterprise, right? I think that's important to understand that once you get, the larger you get, obviously the more moving parts you're going to have, and have a solid and well written out plan. So what is business continuity plan? Well, business continuity plan is a detailed outline of the steps to ensure that business operations continue during an emergency or a natural disaster. Sounds redundant, right? It kind of is. It's exactly what it is. It's a redundancy to your daily operations. If you never have to dust off the business continuity plan, you're lucky. Chances are there's going to be some disruption into your organization, whether it is a disaster or a crisis in the building. It could be flooding. It could be power outage. It could be something simple like that, just affecting your one building. But you're going to have to use what you have for business continuity planning. Business continuity plans reduce any adverse effects, or that's the goal of at least, right, is to reduce any adverse effects from emergencies or disasters. Can it do all? Probably not, but at least you're in the right ballpark, right? You're not down the street in the wrong place. It also aims to reduce the financial losses as well, I think, which is critical. So if you're having a hard time getting your C-suite to discuss the idea of having business continuity plans, talk to the CFO and say, hey, look, when we do this, it's going to reduce the financial impact. And I'm sure you'll have him or her on your team. Continuous updating and maintenance is important to the plan. You can't just write it and let it go, right? You should probably take a look at this at least once a year, drill it, exercise it, make it part of your exercise pattern as well, and dust it off, right? Don't just hate that when people make it a really nice looking binder, they put it on their shelf behind them, and they don't open it for 2-3 years until something occurs, and their ideas and concepts are out of date. The systems that they're using aren't even there. So it has to be continuously updated. The software and things like this that you can use to make it really easy to use. I highly recommend using actually a cloud-based software to use your business continuity planning, because everybody can get at it. And if it's on a PDF as well, you can talk about power outages, but you know, if it's in the cloud, or the ability to get it, and then you have some hard copies as well. But that's the way everybody has access to it and being able to change it. Now, so before we get deep how to write a plan, we'll get into this later, right? You're looking at these 4 basic concepts. You're looking at the idea of planning for an incident, planning for an emergency, planning for a disaster, and planning for a crisis, right? In disaster, crisis, you can flip back and forth, depends on your definition of each of them. I'm going to really define this really quick, and we're going to get into this next week as well. So what is an incident? An incident is anything that occurs by chance due to a combination of unforeseen circumstances, which, if not handled appropriately in a timely fashion, can turn into an emergency, a crisis, or a disaster, right? An emergency is something that needs fast action at this time, and it can be a whole bunch of different things, whether it's a local emergency, right, such as, like, say, a heart attack or some sort of chemical spill in the building, things like that is an emergency, all right? Or it could be something that is outside of your agency. And one of the things I like to discuss on that is the concept of the protest, right? Because we all have been seeing protests happening around the world. So a protest that becomes more violent, right? It starts off as being a bunch of people exercising their First Amendment rights, and then as it becomes more violent, maybe it moves from the incident that you have to prepare for, such as boarding up your windows and things like this, to an emergency where the building becomes vandalized, maybe some people are injured, and property is damaged or stolen, right? And that rolls into a crisis. And so it sounds like I'm splitting hairs here, but a crisis, if that rolls up, so say that the people just go by you and there's some damage to the building, maybe somebody's injured, which is unfortunate, but no one's really seriously injured. That still stays an emergency. A crisis turns into it when that becomes more violent, possibly the more injured people, severely injured. It won't stop. It's going on for more than a couple hours, and maybe potentially the building is severely damaged to where you can't utilize it tomorrow, such as fire or flooding or whatever. And then the disaster, again, you can flip those back and forth, is where if the protest moves into the point to where, it goes on for days and weeks, right? And so in that case, your business now is completely disrupted, and you're unable to continue from that particular location. And it's going to be months and months and months before you can get back up and running. So that's where it comes into disaster. Now we can talk about, you can flip those back and forth, like I said, depends on how you define them. But that's just the basic ideas of what they are. So the idea here is when you're making your plan, you have to plan for those areas. You have to plan for the basic incident that can move into emergency, that moves into a disaster or crisis, right? And then when you do that, you're making your plan for that. And so you're trying to mitigate early on and stop it from cascading into the next level, if you will. Now, mind you, it doesn't have to go that way. It can go, like if you have a large-scale earthquake or a storm come through, obviously you skip those other things directly right into a disaster. And then we can talk more about that next week. Hey, everybody, it's been a pleasure being here with you this morning. And thank you for being with us. And visit Titan HST for all your communication needs. And remember, follow us on your favorite podcast player, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and join us next week. And until then, stay safe, stay hydrated.